Brotherhood got in.
Oh yes.
And then they suddenly turned it around, jailed them all, killed them. They made them suffer. There was no need for that. And it does make you wonder about what's happening today in Palestine. They thought ahead, didn't they? So many people don't realise how far ahead people plan and do this sort of work. And I think people really need to think very, very carefully when you look at what's happening today. Why did it happen? And that's your main problem, isn't it? That's where the issue really is. That's why I think I know there's a brother over there, he's talking about politics, what you should and shouldn't do. But clearly, I mean, for instance, what does Islam say on politics? There's a good question. What if you're not have any understanding whatsoever of Islam? What if you're new to the faith? How do you explain what politics is to them? Can you stand by and allow things to happen to people? This is really important.
Islam is fundamental to politics, you see, because it's not just a religion where you go to the mosque and do your prayers or give your charity. It's an active participant in the day-to-day affairs. So that will naturally clash with the system in place. So
that's right.
It's absolutely essential that the Islamic inculcation is done. That they don't want. I mean, it's very, very clear. The system does not want you to speak against what they want to impose upon to you. I mean, these corrupt regimes that we've got in the Middle East, they can't move an inch without Western domination. We all know this. It's very, very clear.
It is. It's set, isn't it?
It's all set. And the tragedy of the matter is inculcated itself into the indigenous masses who have now become lost to the, if you want to call it, to the world and lost their values.
Yeah.
So this has become like an infested disease within the Muslim countries, and hence they become subdued. And by that method, the powers that be, or the authorities within these countries, they take their tutelage from the regimes here, you see, from the West in particular, in order to subdue the Islamic narrative. It's been 100 years since the Khalifa got destroyed.
That's right.
And they have not, they swore. I remember I think it was the Lloyd George government. They took an oath that they would never allow the reinvention
of this. It wasn't allowed for 100 years. Those 100 years have expired, brother. So what next? They now know to subdue even more because they don't want that to re-emerge. That's the last thing they want. But brother, what's the best thing for people to do?
So in this, because we're essentially disunited, which is the tragedy, number one tragedy, and the second thing will be the inculcation of Islamic values within one's lives. So Allah says that if by considerable narratives, that if we as Muslims we attain to and pertain to His law, that He will make us above all nations. It's the fact that we've gone into transgression, essentially speaking, which has left us in this state that we're in. Let's put it that way. And it comes from the top. Just take a classic example of what's recently happened in Pakistan. That's a classic example. The corrupt leaders were here for 4 years, taking orders from their their masters, the British. And what happened? They got rid of Imran Khan, the very individual, just like that. Just like that. So they got rid of him. For what? Because he didn't want American bases in Pakistan. He wanted them away from the IMF, the subjugation. Yeah. But they couldn't handle it, so they just did what they had to do behind the scenes, and they got rid of him. And they brought back the corrupt leader, the very people who have, stolen from the country in their multitudes. So we need to be aware that the British and the Western American governments, they are culpable in this. They want to subdue Islam. And what is this all about? They want to subdue it so that these supposed civil liberties can reach such a mannerism within their communities that an anti-God process of living becomes rampant, you see. It's not just about, I don't believe that they're doing all this just to control the oil or just to control wealth. It's the way we live. It's the way we live which is essential to how they want to control these Muslim countries. And that is to go away from the religion and to adapt secular values.
Well, they want them to have dependencies upon, basically idolic images, for example, right? There's a famous one going on here today, I believe. Some person of fame is going to be revered by young people. Even young, Muslim boys and girls are going to be saying, oh, that'd be a great gig to go to. Maybe it's not a great gig to go to, because really that's a form of idolatry, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's inculcating. And there's a terrible video I saw. There was I think it was an artist called Bayonnaise. She went off to Saudi Arabia to do a concert. And it was a harrowing little clip I saw on YouTube, on the shorts, in which Arabs, dressed up like me, they were running over, they pushed away the barriers and were sprinting towards the stadium in which she was going to do her particular show. And shocking the way the filming was, they were running, sprinting with these clothes on. And I felt sick to the core watching it. Where are your values?
Yeah.
Where are your commonalities that you had through history? So this is unfortunately what's happening, and we have got to speak up, because the powers that be want us to be in fear of speaking about issues which are of a political nature. They're frightened stiff. And even people that we do this type of calling people to Islam, they're happy for us to do that, but not involving politics, or not bringing their attention to what they're up to. I mean, look at the support that they're giving to Israel as a result of what they're doing. It's beyond comprehension, isn't it? So it begs the question, who are these people? I've got my own theories. It's to do with eschatology. It's to do with Satanism as well. They're heavily ingrained in that, you see.
I believe so, I mean, I think that is fundamentalist in most popular culture music these days, that they expose to young minds. Now, I mean, obviously, older people like ourselves, we can rationalise what it is people are trying to, but if we know what's going in the message. But something was interesting last night. Mustafa was performing in Camden, and he did something incredibly unusual. I can remember him from the 1960s, because I'm getting old. But I remember him for one particular thing. He took to faith, he exercised it. He continued with his music, he continued with his artistic culture, and he used that to benefit people and to make people open their eyes to the goodness around them. Now, what I was very surprised at last night was he did something extraordinary, which I don't know if you saw the broadcast, but he said, in a departure, which I no doubt will be finding talked about, what I'd like to say is independent.
Pardon?
Independent. From his mouth came, you can't vote for these political parties, but he did say independent. I can only take from that as a Muslim brother, he's saying you can't vote in politics, but what will stop them doing what they're doing is that. I don't know, is that right? How do you view that?
Very good point.
Isn't it?
It's a very good point. I mean, in terms of, do we vote for independent candidates, or do we put Muslims forward themselves? There are many Muslims. In the constituency where I live, there's actually a brother who's simply going into the election as a candidate he doesn't have a manifesto in place, simply on the Palestine issue. And we're hopeful that he will get a good number of votes, so we can actually get a position within Parliament and de-seat the lady who's been there for a number of years. So so these are some things where that need to be done. But Muslims do need representation, otherwise their voice will be cut.
You're entitled to representation. I mean, it beggars belief that certain religions get great representation and Islam gets trashed. And it does in the media.
Yes.
And I would know that from
Or even people, just like even there where there is Muslim representation, for example, Hamza Yusuf, who was the first minister. Why did he why is he being chosen? Simply for the reason that he inculcated the values of the secular state. Totally contradictory to the Islamic values.
But I think, if you talk to your average person, and I've spoken to probably the spot of a couple of thousand people today, over the last few days, 6,000 people in the course of what I'm actually doing. And when you actually ask them these questions, people without faith recognise something's actually going on. They're not happy at all about party-led politics, and they're looking towards independent individuals who are saying, I'm holding to these values, give me your support, I want to hold them in power to account.
And I think generally speaking, it can resonate with people who hold those values. So even, for example, you look at Christians as an example, they hold good values similar to Muslims as well. Like, for example, the authority of the father in the home, the rejection of things which are anti-God, which are, people generally want those values. I read in recent Times, not recent, number of years ago, a Times article in which it stated 8 out of 10 women, they would like to remain at home looking after the children rather than going out to work. That's the reality of what actually women want. They're not desperate to go out to work.
Let me bring you something very interesting, okay? And I'm a little bit older than you, not much, and you're very learned in what you're saying. And
I'm just learning.
Very much appreciate. I am always learning. I'll never stop until the day that I go for my Jannah. That's it. Until that day, I am not going to stop learning. But I remember when I was a very young man, I grew up in North Wales. You could buy a house for, including disbursements, £12,000. Basically, that's 1.5 years the poor man's wages. None of his wife's. Today, that's not even possible. The way they've changed things around for people. People are being stuck into a monetary system, and faith is going right out of the window for people. So it's very difficult for people to make decisions when, in fact, banks will lend you credit, they'll give you an overdraft. It's not even your money.
Yes.
They're putting you in debt. That is exactly what the IMF is doing to other countries, especially in the Muslim countries.
Yes.
They're trying to put the IMF in there, as you know yourself what's going on.
Yeah.
But how can one make people in the street understand this without them thinking that's like a Muslim bogey worry?
I think what we need to do, I mean, Prophet, there was a great example I thought of. What can we Muslims do to put pressure on our governments to stop what's going on in Israel? Do you know what we can do? It's very easy. No one has got the
hit them where it hurts. Their profits, money.
You know what? I've got a plan. It's an easy plan. Did you know 33% of London's businesses are owned by Muslims? Did you know 1.5 million of the 9 million inhabitants of London are Muslim? If, for example, every one of us close our businesses, accountants, doctors, lawyers, all the people who work in order, they went on a 2-week strike, London's economy would collapse.
Sorry.
London's economy would... Where do you see Muslims, where the Maulana say, okay, this is today's Friday sermon.
July the 4th day, couldn't it, if they decided?
You know, what I'm saying is that where do we hear in Jummah khutbah, where the Imam stand up and said, listen, we Muslims, we're seeing our brothers suffering in Palestine, what are we going to do? What is what we're going to do? Doctors, lawyers, accountants, businessmen, stop your businesses for 2 weeks. Make the announcement in every mosque in London. Just in London. You watch how this economy will fall to its knees. You see what we can do? No one's even saying. There was just a thought I had, and I thought, what a magnificent idea. Imagine 33% of London's businesses closed for 2 weeks. Will that not have an effect on the economy? If doctors, lawyers, accountants, or professionals, people working within any industry, they go on strike, they don't go into work for 2 weeks. But we're not thinking the habit is too much happy with the comfort of our own lives.
To be honest with you, at my latter stage in life, that's how I think. If I know there's a load of armed vehicles coming towards me, I'm not going to waste money putting bombs on them. I'm going to stop your fuel supply. Cut the fuel. Exactly. Cut what fuels it.
Yes, precisely.
And I think that's the real answer at my old age.
That's a very sensible. But I think this is a master plan. It's straightforward. Don't go into work for 2 weeks of all those professions I've mentioned. Yeah. You see London's 1.5 million. You're talking about nearly 20% of London's population will there and then not go attend. That means the economy will be collapsing within 2 weeks. Simple thing we can do. Yeah. Who's going to do that? Are we going to go work on Monday morning? No, we're fueling the British governments, the American governments, who are going to be going in, using all the money to kill our innocent brothers and sisters in Palestine. And all we can do is sit in mosques and say, let's make dua. Let's put our hands together and say, God, you do everything. We're too used to do anything.
If I'm not mistaken, okay, we were created, okay? Now, if we were created, the Creator's got a purpose for us, what do? Sit and do nothing?
Yeah.
No, I think, in all honesty, people should be very effective in what their conscience is, even as a human being, even without faith. Have faith in a human being, which even if people are atheists, right, have a faith in a human being, well, you may not realise that we were created, but you've still got faith in the creation yourself. In that case, even they can make that difference if they don't agree with one thing, which is killing like that, murdering.
You know what I've done on a personal level?
Yeah.
Since October the 7th and the events that have occurred, I've sworn to myself I'm not going to go and eat out in restaurants or go and have luxury foods. Yeah. I'm at home, I'm just eating the necessities. I'm not, because why? Because whilst they're suffering, I've seen many restaurants here, Muslim restaurants, Muslims full up with their families, enjoying everything. Isn't it resonating? What are we doing? It's hypocrisy. It's just self-centered.
If you haven't got a faith, or worse, if you're a Zionist person, then you're going to look at that as hypocrisy and take pictures and go, they're enjoying themselves.
They're enjoying them. So that's what we want. That's what we want. So this is the disaster that we're facing, you see.
Listen, do you know, I'm not bothered by them. I see them every day. The other thing is this, people have criticised on the mainstream media, oh, if you come to Gaza, you see how beautiful, it isn't beautiful now, is it?
No, it's not.
They said, look, it's beautiful, they're having a nice time. Do you know what? That's because when Israeli had the settlers there with the money, they did all those buildings. they put them there. So, no, it wasn't the basic Palestinian people who put them there. They're too right, it wasn't. They did. And they left for one reason. Do you know why they left? Do you know the reason was given? It was simple. Israel said, we can't keep supporting you here, over here, just to live here as settlers. You're not having enough children, you're not reproducing. They've got enough faith within themselves. Yet if you look at the average Muslim person, they value life. You have your children, mashallah, they're going to go on, they're going to continue. The generations you won't even see yourself. That is, in my opinion, the point of faith.
Yes.
That if you do something, brother,
Yes.
for children you'll never see, great-grandchildren you'll never see. You know why? If they've got the faith, what you did today is for them, not for you, brother.
Fantastic, brother. Very good. I appreciate your time and sentiments.
Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, Allah bless you.
Stay with you.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Very nice conversation with a revert brother who's spoken about things that are very much important. You see, we're a bit frightened to speak about these topics because we're afraid of for ourselves, for our livelihoods, or for our, for our ease or comfort. These topics need to be spoken about. Alhamdulillah, we're doing dawah, we're trying to invite people to Islam. That is what we could do in our limited capacity, but we need to do other things. I've been saying for a long time, Muslims, what we need to do, if you really love your Palestinian brothers and sisters, don't go work Monday morning. Okay, do not go to work on Monday morning. If you're accountants, lawyers, barristers, these are things you can do to stop this economy of London from fueling itself and giving the money to what's happening by Britain and America supporting Israel. That's what you can do here today. Who's going to take that risk? Where do we see imams in mosques standing up and say, we're going to do a day of action? We're making announcements in the masjids. Accountants, lawyers, barristers, business owners. I just made mention in this conversation, 33% of London's businesses are owned by Muslims. 1.5 million people out of the 9 million people are Muslims. And what are we doing to help our brothers and sisters there? This is an idea which came into my head. Do not go to work for 2 weeks. Watch London's economy collapse. Okay? Now, by me even saying this, they're going to say, oh, brother, you're going to make things difficult for yourself, and people are going to come out and speak. But what's the point of doing this dawah if we can't feel the pain, this extreme pain of the suffering of our brothers and sisters in Palestine, of course, all over the world as well? May Allah give us the hidayah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.